Lisa Chen couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong in Pinewood. As she flipped through patient files at the clinic where she worked part-time, the pattern jumped out at her like a flashing warning light. Too many people coming in with the same breathing problems. Too many kids with unexplained rushes. And most of them lived on the east side of town, downwind from Acitec Industries. The morning sun streamed through the blinds as Lisa rubbed her tired eyes. She'd stayed up late again, marking addresses on her town map with colored pins. Red for respiratory issues, blue for skin problems, yellowed for unexplained headaches. The cluster around Acitec was impossible to ignore. "You're going to be late again," her husband Tom said, placing a cup of coffee beside her scattered papers. "What's all this anyway?" Lisa took a sip and pointed to the map. "Look at this pattern. Almost everyone who's getting sick lives in the path of the wind that blows from the factory. That can't be a coincidence." Tom frowned. "Careful with that kind of talk. Acitec pays our bills, remember? Half the town works there, including my brother." I know. But people are getting sick, Tom. Real people. Mrs. Wilson's grandson can barely breathe some days, and he's only 7. At the clinic that day, Lisa noticed Dr. Powell watching as she added another patient address to her growing spreadsheet. "Interesting project?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. Lisa hesitated. Dr. Powell was the clinic director, and the clinic received generous donations from Acitec every year. Their logo was plastered on the waiting room wall. "Just noticing some patterns in our respiratory cases," she said carefully. Dr. Powell's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We get all kinds of seasonal trends. Nothing to worry about. 27 new cases in 3 months isn't seasonal, doctor. And 23 of them live downwind from the factory." The smile vanished. "Lisa, I think you're overreaching. You're trained in environmental science, not medicine. Acitec provides jobs for hundreds of families here. They meet all government regulations. I'd hate to see you stirring up trouble based on coincidences." That evening, instead of heading straight home, Lisa parked near the creek that ran behind the factory. She pulled on rubber boots and gloves from her trunk and carefully collected water samples in sterile containers. The water had a faint, unnatural shimmer to it, and the normal creek insects were nowhere to be seen. As she screwed the lid on her final sample, a twig snapped behind her. Lisa spun around to find a man watching her. He wore the gray uniform of Acitec workers, but his ID badge was turned backward. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low. Lisa straightened up, heart hammering. "Water samples for a personal project. Public creek, public access." The man glanced over his shoulder before stepping closer. "You're right to check the water," he whispered. "I can tell you what they're dumping, but not here. Too many eyes." Before Lisa could respond, a factory whistle blew in the distance. The man stiffened. "Creek Bend, 2 miles downstream. Tomorrow, 6 p.m., he said quickly, then turned and hurried away. That night, Lisa couldn't sleep. She tucked her water samples into the back of the garage freezer and added the day's patient addresses to her map. The pins formed an unmistakable pattern now, like an accusing finger pointing straight at Acitec. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Be careful who you trust. Not everyone wants the truth to come out." Lisa stared at the message, then at the map with its damning cluster of pins. She'd moved to Pinewood 5 years ago, built a life here. People knew her, respected her. But now she had to choose, stay quiet and safe, or dig deeper and risk everything. Tomorrow at the creek bend, she'd make her choice. Lisa arrived at the creek bend early, her heart pounding against her ribs. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the trees. She told Tom she was meeting a colleague about water testing, not exactly a lie, but not the whole truth either. A rustle in the bushes made her jump. The man from yesterday emerged, looking nervously over his shoulder before approaching. Up close, she could see the dark circles under his eyes and the way his hands trembled slightly. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I'm Alex." "Lisa, why all the secrecy, Alex?" He sat on a fallen log, rubbing his palms against his jeans. "I worked at Acitec for 8 years. Quality Control Department. Last month they fired me when I asked too many questions." "Questions about what?" Alex pulled out his phone, swiped through several photos. "This happens every Tuesday and Friday around midnight." The supervisors think nobody notices. Lisa looked at the photos, workers in protective gear dumping barrels into the creek. In one image, the water glowed faintly blue under the moonlight. They switched to night dumping last year, Alex explained. The chemicals they use in the new manufacturing process, they're banned in most countries. Too expensive to dispose of properly, so he gestured toward the creek. Lisa felt sick. Have you shown this to anyone? The EPA. The State Environmental Office. And say what? That I snuck around taking pictures after they fired me. They'd call me a disgruntled ex-employee. Besides, his voice dropped. The plant manager plays golf with the regional EPA director. They're old college buddies. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. Everything I could download before they escorted me out. Production logs, chemical inventories, internal memos about cost-effective disposal solutions. Take it. Lisa hesitated before accepting it. This could be dangerous for both of us. It already is, Alex said grimly. My kid's teacher called last week, said he's having trouble breathing. We live 2 blocks from the creek. The drive felt impossibly heavy in Lisa's hand. Thank you. I'll be careful with this. You better be. These people, they don't play nice. On the drive home, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She took 3 wrong turns, checking her rearview mirror each time before finally heading home. The house was dark when she arrived. Tom had left a note about picking up dinner with friends. She locked the door, then double-checked it before turning on her computer. The flash drive contained dozens of folders, technical documents, spreadsheets, emails between executives. One folder labeled Regulatory Compliance contained 2 sets of reports, one marked Official and another marked Actual. The differences were staggering. A spreadsheet listed chemicals with names she recognized from her environmental science days. Compounds linked to respiratory issues, skin problems, even neurological damage with long-term exposure. Exactly what she was seeing in her clinic patients. An email from the plant director read, "Remind everyone that our community involvement program is our best insurance policy. Keep the donations flowing to the clinic, schools, and town events. Happy neighbors ask fewer questions." Lisa printed key documents, hands shaking as pages filled with damning evidence stacked up beside her. She was so absorbed that she almost missed the sound, a faint scraping at the back door. Freezing in place, she listened. Another noise, like a window being tested. Someone was trying to get in. She quickly shut down the computer, grabbed the flash drive and the most important papers, and slipped into the hall closet. Through the slats, she saw a beam of light sweep across her living room. Someone was inside. The intruder moved methodically through the house, checking drawers, rifling through papers on her desk. When they reached her computer, they spent several minutes there before continuing the search. Lisa held her breath, clutching the flash drive so tightly it cut into her palm. After what felt like hours, the light disappeared and she heard the back door close. She waited 10 more minutes before emerging. The house looked almost normal, except for subtle signs. A drawer not quite closed, papers slightly rearranged. They'd been careful, professional. If she hadn't been home, she might never have known someone had been there. Her research materials had been searched but left behind. They didn't know what they were looking for yet, but they knew she was looking. Lisa's phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "On my way home. Everything okay?" She stared at the flash drive in her trembling hand. Nothing was okay anymore, and there was no going back. Lisa didn't tell Tom about the break-in. What would she say? That she had evidence someone might kill for? That she was putting their family at risk? Instead, she hid the flash drive in a waterproof container buried in her garden under the rose bushes. The next morning, she called her old college roommate, Nora, now an environmental lawyer in the city. "I need help with something," Lisa said carefully over the phone. "Something big. But I can't talk about it over the phone." "You sound scared," Nora said. "My office at 2 o'clock. The law firm was a sleek glass building downtown, a world away from Pinewood. Lisa clutched her bag containing the printed documents and the flash drive, constantly checking to make sure no one followed her. Nora's face changed as she looked through the evidence, her professional composure cracking with each page she turned. This is, Lisa, do you understand what you've stumbled onto? This isn't just environmental negligence. These chemicals they're dumping, we're talking serious federal violations. People are getting sick, Lisa said. Kids can't breathe. The company knows exactly what they're doing. Nora pulled out a legal pad. We need to organize this properly. The chemical reports, the falsified compliance documents, the health data you've collected. She paused at a spreadsheet. Wait, these figures, they're tracking the cost savings of illegal dumping against potential fines if caught. They've literally calculated that it's cheaper to poison people and pay fines than dispose of these chemicals legally. Lisa's stomach turned. Can we stop them? Yes, Nora said, but it won't be easy. These emails show they've got connections in the local government. Look, the plant manager and the mayor discussing how to manage public concerns about water quality. As they worked, Nora's assistant brought in coffee. Lisa took a sip, then stopped cold as she saw another email. Nora, look at this. The town council approved a zoning change last year allowing Aztec to expand operations closer to the elementary school. But these environmental impact studies were deliberately altered. The council never saw the real data. Nora leaned forward. That's their biggest mistake. Endangering kids and hiding evidence from government officials? That's not just illegal, it's political suicide. By evening, they had organized everything into clear categories: financial evidence, falsified reports, health statistics, internal communications, and a timeline of events. Nora made copies of everything. What happens now? Lisa asked. I file complaints with the EPA and the State Environmental Agency. Then we prepare for the storm. Once this goes public, Aztec will fight back hard. They'll try to discredit you, possibly threaten you. Are you ready for that? Lisa thought about her patients, about Alex's sick child, about the future of her town. I have to be. The drive home felt longer than usual. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off now or things get worse. Her hands shook as she deleted it. When she pulled into her driveway, her neighbor Mrs. Patel waved her over. Lisa, dear, I thought you should know. A man was asking about you today. Said he was an old friend, but something felt off. Wanted to know about your work schedule, when you come and go. A chill ran down Lisa's spine. What did you tell him? Nothing. I've known you 5 years. If you had such a friend, I'd have met him. Mrs. Patel lowered her voice. My husband took a photo through the window. Not clear, but maybe you recognize him. The grainy photo showed a man in business casual clothes, sunglasses hiding his eyes. In the background, partially visible, was a car with what looked like the Aztec logo on the door. Thank you, Lisa whispered. If he comes back. I'll call the police, Mrs. Patel said firmly. Something's not right here. At home, Lisa found Tom in the kitchen making dinner, blissfully unaware of how their lives were about to change. She almost told him everything then, but her phone buzzed with another message. This one had a photo of Tom leaving his office, clearly taken that day. The text read, Does he know what you're doing? Does he know what it will cost you both? Hands trembling, Lisa deleted the message and forced a smile for her husband. Hey, how was your day? Later that night, after Tom was asleep, Lisa sat in the dark living room making a list of people she could trust, people who might stand with her when everything broke open. The list was shorter than she'd hoped. Outside, a car drove slowly past their house for the 3rd time that evening. Lisa moved away from the window, but not before seeing it pause briefly at the curb. They were watching, waiting. She was running out of time to expose the truth before Aztec buried it, and possibly her, for good. Lisa stared at her phone for a long time before making the call. Her finger hovered over the number, knowing once she pressed it, there was no turning back. Finally, she tapped the screen. Aztec Industries, how may I direct your call? Richard Wilson's office, please. Tell him it's Lisa Chen about the creek water samples. There was a pause before the receptionist transferred her. She half expected to be hung up on, but instead, a deep voice answered. Miss Chen, I was wondering when you'd call. My secretary says you're requesting a meeting. Yes, Lisa said, surprised by her own steady voice. I think we have matters to discuss. Indeed we do. She could hear the smile in his voice, confident and unconcerned. How's tomorrow, 2 p.m.? My office. That night, Lisa finally told Tom everything. She spread the documents across their kitchen table, the falsified reports, the chemical analyses, the photos from Alex, the threatening messages. Tom's face grew paler with each new piece of evidence. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "They threatened you," Lisa said, showing him the photo they'd sent of him leaving work. "I was trying to protect you." Tom ran his hands through his hair. "By keeping me in the dark." "Lisa, they could have." He couldn't finish the sentence. "What are you going to do now?" "Meet with Wilson tomorrow. Show him what I know." "Alone? That's insane." "If I don't show up, Nora will release everything to the authorities. He knows that. He's not stupid." Tom shook his head. "No, he's not stupid. He's dangerous." The Aztec headquarters towered over the town, all gleaming glass and steel. Lisa dressed carefully in her most professional outfit, the flash drive secure in her pocket, copies of key documents in her bag. Tom had wanted to come with her, but she convinced him to stay away, just in case. Richard Wilson's office occupied the entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Pinewood, including the creek that wound like a dark ribbon through the landscape. "Ms. Chen," Wilson said, rising from behind an enormous desk. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 40s, with a carefully maintained tan and a smile that never reached his eyes. "Please have a seat. Coffee." Lisa declined, taking in the framed photos of Wilson with various politicians, the community service awards on the wall, the model of the planned Aztec expansion. "I understand you have concerns about our environmental practices," Wilson began, sitting across from her. "As the town's largest employer and a committed community partner, we take such matters very seriously." Lisa placed a folder on his desk. "These water samples from the creek behind your facility contain levels of hexavalent compounds that are 80 times the legal limit." Wilson didn't even glance at the folder. Testing can be so unreliable when not done by certified professionals. "The state lab certified these results yesterday," Lisa said, along with soil samples showing the same contamination pattern. Something flickered in Wilson's eyes, surprise quickly masked. "I see. Well, if there is contamination, we should investigate the source. There are several older facilities upstream." "I also have these," Lisa interrupted, placing printouts of Alex's photos on the desk. "And these." She added the internal emails about the midnight dumping schedule. Wilson's pleasant expression hardened. He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Nancy, hold my calls, please." He released the button and leaned forward. "Let's be direct, Ms. Chen. What do you want?" "I want the dumping to stop. I want Aztec to clean up the contamination. I want medical monitoring for affected families." Wilson laughed, a cold sound with no humor in it. "Do you have any idea what that would cost? The shareholders would crucify me." "Children are getting sick," Lisa said. "Your employees' children." "Unfortunate, but unprovable as to cause." Wilson stood and walked to the window. "You know, your husband's brother just got promoted to shift supervisor. Good man, hard worker. It would be a shame if the plant had to reduce operations due to costly new environmental controls. So many families would be affected." The threat hung in the air between them. "Are you threatening the entire town's livelihood?" Lisa asked. Wilson turned, smiling again. "Not at all. I'm offering you an opportunity. Your background in environmental science is impressive. We've been looking to expand our sustainability department. 6 figures, company car, flexible hours. You could do real good here, Ms. Chen, from the inside." Lisa felt sick. "You're trying to buy me off." "I'm offering you a path where everyone wins. The alternative," he shrugged. "Small-town whistleblowers don't fare well, historically speaking. Friends stop calling. Jobs disappear. Accidents happen." Lisa stood up, gathering her documents. "You've made your position clear." "Think about it," Wilson said, walking her to the door. "Take the weekend. Consider what's really at stake, not just for you, but for everyone you care about." In the elevator down, Lisa's phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Are you work? Call me." Before she could respond, another message appeared from an unknown number. "Smart people know when to take a good offer. Midnight tonight. Yes or no?" Lisa stepped out of the Aztec building into the bright afternoon sun, feeling as though a target was painted on her back. She had until midnight to decide, her principles or her safety, the truth or peace. And either way, could she live with her choice? Lisa sat in her car in the library parking lot, her hands still shaking from the meeting with Wilson. The midnight deadline loomed over her like a storm cloud. She couldn't accept his offer, but refusing meant putting everyone she loved at risk. Her phone rang. "Nora, how did it go?" her friend asked. "He offered me a job," Lisa said hollowly. 6 figures to keep quiet and join their sustainability department. "Classic move," Nora replied. "Did you get any of it recorded?" "No. He was too careful." "Listen, Lisa. I've been doing some digging. Aztec has done this before in 2 other towns. They moved in, polluted, then either paid off the complainers or scared them away. But there's something different about Pinewood." "What's that?" "The scale. The contamination levels you found are the highest I've ever seen. If this gets out nationally, it won't just be some local fine they can write off. We're talking potential criminal charges for the executives." Lisa watched people coming and going from the library, mothers with children, elderly couples, teenagers with backpacks. Her neighbors, all unknowingly drinking poisoned water, breathing toxic air. "I can't fight them alone, Nora." "You don't have to, but we need more voices, more witnesses." That gave Lisa an idea. "I'll call you back." Inside the library, Lisa used a public computer to create a secure document. She uploaded everything: the water sample results, the photos, the internal emails, her health statistics from the clinic. She removed identifying information from patient records, but kept the symptom patterns and addresses. She stared at the screen, then began a list. Dr. Powell from the clinic. No, too close to Aztec. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patel. Yes, she'd already proven she could be trusted. The high school science teacher, Mr. Chen. Yes, he'd been vocal about environmental issues before. The pastor from the downtown church. Maybe he had a lot of community influence. One by one, Lisa added people she believed might have the courage to stand with her. People beyond Aztec's ability to threaten or buy off. By the time she finished, she had 11 names. She sent each a secure link to the document with a personal message. "Our town is being poisoned. I have proof. If enough of us speak up, they can't silence us all. Meeting tonight, 8 p.m., my house. Tell no one." Walking home, Lisa noticed a black car following slowly behind her. She ducked into the corner grocery store and watched through the window as the car parked across the street. A man in sunglasses sat behind the wheel, watching the store entrance. "Everything okay, Lisa?" asked Mr. Rodriguez, the store owner. "Just avoiding someone," she said, trying to sound casual. "Is there a back door I could use?" Mr. Rodriguez looked concerned but nodded toward the storage room. "Through there. My son can walk you home if you want." "No, that might put him in danger too. But thanks." Lisa slipped out the back and took a roundabout way home, cutting through yards and alleyways. By the time she arrived, Tom was pacing the living room. "Where have you been?" "I've been calling for an hour." "Sorry. I had to be careful getting home. They're watching me." Tom pulled her into a tight hug. "This is getting too dangerous. Maybe we should just leave town." "And go where?" "Let them keep poisoning everyone. Besides, they'd probably follow us." Lisa pulled back. "I've invited people here tonight. People I trust. We're going to form a group." "Here?" "Aren't you crazy? They're watching the house." "Exactly why we need to meet here. They can't stop a social gathering without revealing themselves, and they can't threaten everyone." As evening approached, Lisa and Tom prepared their living room for the meeting. She printed extra copies of key documents. He moved the furniture to create more seating. At 7:30, the first text arrived. "Can't make it. Something came up." Then another, "Sorry, family emergency." And another, "Not feeling well. Rain check." By 7:50, 7 of the 11 had cancelled. "They got to them," Lisa said, her heart sinking. "Somehow they knew who I contacted." The doorbell rang at exactly 8 p.m. Lisa opened it to find Mrs. Patel, Mr. Chen, and 2 other people, a nurse from the clinic and the environmental reporter from the regional newspaper 2 towns over. "Not everyone is afraid," Mrs. Patel said, stepping inside. The small group gathered in the living room as Lisa laid out everything she'd discovered. The nurse, Beth, confirmed seeing the same pattern of illnesses. Mr. Chen described how the creek behind the school had changed over the past year. No frogs anymore, no insects. The reporter, Kevin, took careful notes. This is the biggest environmental story I've seen in 20 years of reporting. But you need to understand, once we publish, Asetek will come at you with everything they've got. They already are, Lisa said, showing them the threatening texts. Kevin held up his phone. Mind if I record this meeting? We need to document the intimidation too. As they talked, headlights swept across the living room window. A car pulled up outside, then another. Tom peeked through the curtains. Wilson is here, with 2 security guys. Lisa felt her chest tighten with fear, but then looked around at the small group who had risked being here. Let them come. We're not doing anything wrong. The midnight deadline was still hours away, but Lisa had already made her choice. There was no going back now. The knock on the door echoed through the silent living room. Lisa and her small group of allies exchanged glances, fear and determination mingling in their expressions. I'll get it, Tom said, squeezing Lisa's hand before walking to the door. Richard Wilson stood on the porch, flanked by 2 men with security badges. His smile was as practiced and empty as it had been in his office. Good evening, he said pleasantly. I was hoping for a word with Lisa. I didn't realize she was hosting a gathering. Tom blocked the doorway. It's a bit late for business discussions, isn't it? Wilson's eyes scanned the living room beyond Tom, noting each person. Not at all, especially when the business is so pressing. His gaze locked with Lisa's. Perhaps we could speak privately. Anything you have to say can be said in front of my friends, Lisa replied, standing up. Something hardened in Wilson's expression. Very well. I wanted to inform you personally that Asetek is holding an emergency town hall meeting tomorrow evening. We'll be addressing some unfounded rumors about our environmental practices that seem to be circulating. Kevin the reporter stepped forward with his phone still recording. Richard Wilson, right? Kevin Dawson, Regional Tribune. Canned a comment on the laboratory results showing toxic chemical levels in Pinewood Creek that exceed federal limits by 80 times. Wilson's smile faltered for just a moment. I'm not familiar with any official testing being conducted. If there are environmental concerns, Asetek would be the first to investigate them. We have internal documents showing you've been aware of the contamination for at least 2 years, Kevin continued. Alleged documents, Wilson corrected smoothly. Anonymous sources are notoriously unreliable. As I said, we'll address all concerns at tomorrow's town hall. He looked directly at Lisa. I hope you'll attend. 7 p.m. at the community center. After they left, everyone sat in stunned silence until Mrs. Patel spoke up. He's going to try to turn the town against you, she said. Make it about jobs versus some crazy environmentalist. It's a classic playbook, Kevin agreed. They'll bring out employees to talk about feeding their families. They'll have charts showing their safety record. They'll promise to investigate while denying everything. So what do we do? Beth, the nurse, asked. We get ready, Lisa said. Kevin runs his story tomorrow morning. The rest of us gather as many people as we can for the town hall. They can't silence everyone. The next morning, Lisa woke to her phone buzzing constantly. Kevin's article had hit the front page. Toxic SECRETS. Asetek Industries linked to chemical dumping, health crisis in Pinewood. The story was even more powerful than Lisa had hoped, with quotes from Beth about the rising health problems, statements from Mr. Chen about environmental changes, and damning excerpts from the internal documents. Lisa had just finished reading when Tom called from downstairs. You need to see this. Outside, someone had spray-painted LINR across their garage door. Down the street, they could see a small crowd gathering at another neighbor's house. An Asetek employee whose daughter had been treated for breathing problems at the clinic. Throughout the day, the town seemed to split in two. Some people called Lisa to offer support or share their own health concerns. Others glared when she passed or crossed the street to avoid her. The town's social media pages exploded with arguments, with Asetek supporters posting about job killers and fake news. By evening, the community center parking lot was overflowing. Lisa and Tom arrived to find people spilling out the doors. "Bigger turnout than the Christmas festival," Tom murmured as they squeezed inside. The room had been carefully arranged. Astitech banners hung on the walls, and a professional-looking presentation was set up. Company employees wore matching T-shirts that read, "Astitech Family." In the front row sat town council members and local business owners who depended on Astitech workers as customers. Wilson took the stage to applause from about half the room. He looked confident, composed in an expensive suit, his voice warm with concern. "Friends and neighbors," he began, "I called this meeting because Pinewood deserves the truth. Today, our community was attacked by outsiders seeking to damage the company that has been the backbone of this town for 30 years. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Wilson clicked to a slide showing employment statistics and local tax contributions. Astitech provides 40% of this town's jobs and contributes over $2 million annually to local schools, healthcare, and community programs, he continued. We've always been transparent about our practices and committed to safety. He clicked to another slide showing official inspection certificates. Our facility meets or exceeds every federal and state requirement. We've won industry awards for our environmental management. Lisa felt the mood of the room shifting, watching people nod along. Wilson was good, very good, at making the allegations sound absurd. The recent accusations are not just false, they're dangerous, Wilson said, his voice dropping to a concerned tone. They threaten the stability of our community, your jobs, your property values, all based on unreliable testing and stolen documents that have been taken out of context. He looked directly at Lisa. We understand environmental concerns. We share them. That's why Astitech is announcing tonight a new community environmental monitoring program with regular public reports and an oversight committee of local citizens. The crowd applauded, relief visible on many faces. A perfect solution that required no admission of wrongdoing. Now, if the person behind these accusations would like to speak, we welcome the dialogue, Wilson said, gesturing toward Lisa with a magnanimous smile. Heart pounding, Lisa made her way to the microphone. The room fell silent, hundreds of eyes watching her, some hopeful, some angry, some simply afraid of what might come next. She had prepared remarks, but looking at her neighbors' faces, Lisa set aside her notes. This wasn't about documents or chemicals anymore. It was about the truth. My name is Lisa Chen, she began, her voice steady despite her fear. And I'm not asking you to choose between jobs and health. I'm asking you why we're being told we can't have both. Lisa took a deep breath, feeling every eye in the community center fixed on her. Her throat felt dry, but her conviction was stronger than her fear. I've lived in Pinewood for 6 years, she continued. I know many of you. Your children come to the clinic where I work. We shop at the same stores. We want the same things, a safe place to live, clean air to breathe, healthy kids. She pointed to the shiny certificates on Wilson's presentation. Those papers say one thing, but the creek behind the factory tells another story. The rising number of children with breathing problems tells another story. The midnight dumping of chemicals tells another story. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. I understand the fear, Lisa said. I'm scared too. Scared of losing my job, my home, my friends. But I'm more scared of what happens if we say nothing while our town is poisoned. She gestured to Beth, the nurse, who stood up. The clinic has seen a 340% increase in respiratory issues in children living on the east side of town. That's not normal. That's not a coincidence. Mr. Chen rose next. The biology classes at the high school have been studying the creek ecosystem for 20 years. We've documented the disappearance of frogs, insects, and native plants in the last 3 years. Something is killing our ecosystem. Wilson stepped forward. These are complex environmental issues with many possible. Let her finish, someone called from the back. Others joined in. Let her speak. Lisa looked toward the sound and saw Alex, the fired employee who had given her the flash drive. He stood with 4 other workers in Astitech uniforms. Tell them about Tuesday nights, Mr. Wilson, Alex called out. Tell them about the special drums that never show up on the inventory. This man was terminated for performance issues, Wilson said quickly. He's not a reliable. I've got the shipping logs, another worker interrupted, waving papers. I've been making copies for months. The chemicals come in, but they never go out through proper disposal." The room erupted in shouting. Wilson tried to regain control, but now workers from different parts of the factory were standing up, each with their own piece of the story. "The filtration system is only turned on during inspections," one said. "We've been told to never document spills under 50 gallons," said another. "My protective gear melted when I worked in Section C," a third added, rolling up his sleeve to show a burn scar. "They said it was my fault for not following procedures." Lisa watched in amazement as the dam finally broke. People weren't just listening to her, they were finding their own voices. Wilson's face had turned an angry red. "These allegations are grounds for termination and possible legal action," he threatened, but his words were lost in the growing chorus of questions and revelations. The mayor, who had been sitting quietly in the front row, finally stood up. "I think we've heard enough," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Acetec has been a valuable partner to this town, but these allegations are serious. I'm requesting state environmental officials begin an immediate investigation." Wilson turned on him. "John, think about what you're doing. The economic impact." "I'm thinking about my granddaughter's asthma attacks," the mayor replied. "Some things matter more than money." The following weeks were a whirlwind. State environmental protection officials arrived with testing equipment and subpoenas. News vans lined the main street. Wilson and 3 other executives were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Lisa found herself at the center of it all, but she wasn't alone anymore. A community coalition formed: workers, teachers, healthcare providers, parents, all demanding answers and accountability. 6 months later, Lisa stood by the creek with Tom, watching environmental engineers set up remediation equipment. The preliminary findings had been even worse than she'd feared: decades of contamination that would take years to clean up. "Was it worth it?" Tom asked, squeezing her hand. Lisa thought about the difficult months behind them, the legal depositions, the angry neighbors who still blamed her for the temporary mill shutdown, the friends who couldn't handle the controversy and drifted away. But she also thought about the children whose breathing had improved since the dumping stopped. The new filtration system being installed at the factory. The community health monitoring program that would track outcomes for years to come. "Look," she said, pointing to the water's edge where a small green frog sat on a rock, the first she'd seen there in years. Acetec was still operating, though under new management and strict oversight. Some jobs had been lost in the transition, but others were created through the cleanup effort. The town was healing, slowly but surely. Her phone buzzed with a message from Beth. "Test results back for the Murphy boy. Lung function improved 40% since January." "Yes," Lisa finally answered Tom, smiling through sudden tears. It was worth it. As they walked home along the creek path, a young woman approached them, looking nervous. "Are you Lisa Chen?" she asked. Lisa nodded, wondering if this was another angry resident. Instead, the woman handed her a thumb drive. "I'm from the chemical plant in Oak Ridge, the next county over. We've been seeing the news about what happened here." She glanced around before continuing. "The same thing is happening where I work. Worse, maybe. I didn't know who else to go to." Lisa looked at the thumb drive, then at Tom, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "Come over for dinner," Lisa said, taking the woman's hand. "We've got a lot to talk about." In her pocket, Lisa still kept Alex's original flash drive as a reminder that one person's courage could spark a change. The road ahead would be difficult. Corporate money and power didn't yield easily to the truth, but she wasn't just one person anymore. Sometimes standing up for what's right costs everything, and sometimes it gives back more than you could imagine.